If I was starting again, like if right now I was like, oh, I want to get into sports medicine, one of the first things I would do is probably take one of the cadaver labs. There's cadaver labs that's through the sports medicine acupuncture program. There's some other people that are doing them throughout the country. And it's acupuncturists doing cadaver labs and showing you the meridians, showing you the structures, showing you the safety, like letting you do them with them and cut through. And that's what taught me the most, I would say, is being able to be hands-on with cadavers.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. A colleague asked me what kinds of patient education I usually do, and the answer was none. She thought I was putting her on. She couldn't imagine how I wasn't trying to talk people into living better through Chinese medicine. Maybe it's a failure on my part, and for sure, a reason why I'm not a social media influencer who's out to convince and correct people in service of putting them on the righteous path to wellness. Seems to me those influencer folks are the modern equivalent of an evangelistic preacher, all gloss and gospel and woe be to you if you don't listen up. Me? I've kind of given up on trying to talk anyone into anything. I used to think it was part of my job to correct people in their habits and routines, but what I found over the years was mostly people would ignore me. I started to notice that there was a problem with this patient education thing when I'd be going on and on about something that I thought would be helpful for them, but there was a sudden chill in the room. I could tell the patient had pulled back or zoned out. Whatever connection we had cooking, it was gone. It's not that I want to hold back from my patients, just that if they aren't asking me for advice, I'm not going to volunteer it. Likewise, if they ask me about dry needling, I leave it at, it's a kind of acupuncture that can be useful for local knots and bound up muscles. I leave out the part about training and the clever rebranding because in the past, when I ventured into that bit of, let's call it education, it tended to adversely affect any rapport that I'd built up with them. When it comes to advice, I leave that to other people who enjoy doing that. For me, it's enough to meet my patients where they are and then allow them to guide me into how I might be helpful. While dry needling is an aspect of acupuncture, it's also a form of acupuncture that has found its way into the integrative medicine world. Tricky term that one is, integrative medicine, which I suspect is a way of describing the places where medical traditions overlap, intermingle, and cross-pollinate. It's that cross-pollination piece that I think allows for all kinds of expansion of knowledge and skill, but also where issues of turf and sense of ownership easily can give rise to fights over scope of practice and who gets to define what acupuncture is or is not. In this conversation with Darren Maynard, we discuss sports acupuncture, which he points out is a kind of vague term, as it includes modern physiology, ancient Chinese medicine fundamentals, and it overlaps with other disciplines that focus on the musculo-skeletal system. Our discussion made me reconsider what I think about so-called integrative medicine, and that practitioners of any stripe are always looking for a way to notch up their skill and capacity so as to be able to help others. As dry needling becomes more and more accepted in the conventional medical world, it is incumbent on us as acupuncturists to be able to come to some kind of reckoning for how acupuncture has found its way into the mainstream. I appreciate Darren's thoughtful perspective, and we'll be sharing that with you right after a few words from the people who make it possible for you to enjoy Geological. We are grateful to the sponsors who support Geological. Here's a preview of solutions our sponsors have for you. Mayway Herbs helps you care for your patients in the spring season with formulas for seasonal allergies and dermatological conditions. Round Cups, Yeah, they have their place, but Fascia Buddies square cups interact with fascial planes in a whole different way. Later in the show, you'll hear why Jane is my favorite EMR with their extensive feature list and ability to customize to your unique clinic. And Blue Poppy reminds us there's no such thing as a small detail. Your focus and intention are important. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers for listeners of the podcast. How many times have you opened your podcast feed and felt that little spark of delight seeing a new Qiological episode? Imagine being part of what makes that possible. Just a few dollars a month helps to keep the wisdom and the connection alive for all of us. Visit our website and help support the podcast that helps to support you.
Hi, folks. I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. As we move into March and transition to spring, many patients begin experiencing seasonal allergies. This month, we're highlighting classical and modern formulas for rhinitis, congestion, and phlegm patterns, along with comparison charts to support clear formula differentiation in the clinic. Later in the month, we'll shift our focus to seasonal skin conditions and practical pattern-based treatment strategies as wind in both an environmental and TCM sense begins to stir. Also, enjoy a special 2-part conversation between Dr. Skye Sturgeon and myself on our podcast, Chinese Medicine Matters, in which we have a fun and at times deep, but definitely informative chat about yin and yang. Since 1969, Mayway Herbs has supported practitioners with high-quality herbal products and trusted educational resources. Learn more at mayway.com. We wish you and your patients a smooth and healthy transition into spring, and thanks for supporting real Chinese medicine.
If you believe plastic cups don't compare to glass cups, and if we're talking the usual round plastic cups, I would agree. Hi, I'm John Stan, inventor of the Fascia Buddy square cupping system. Our square cups change the mechanics of cupping and how you engage tissues and channels. Fascia doesn't organize itself in circles, it transmits force along lines and planes. And sinew channels? Well, they travel in pathways too. Our square cups sit edge to edge, allowing practitioners to build continuous decompression chains that follow those lines across the body. As Matt Callison states in his review, quote, I am a fire cupping advocate and still use the traditional cupping system frequently. However, Fascia Buddy uses square plastic cups uniquely designed to be placed side by side, creating an effective chain to match the contours of the body like no other system I've seen. End of quote. To read the full review, visit fasciabuddy.com/testimonials, and while you're there, explore the distributor page to expand your cupping treatment options today.
Darren Maynard, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you.
I have been looking forward to this. We're going to chew the fat on some sports acupuncture.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Whatever that means. What do you mean, whatever that means?
It's a very broad stroke term that I think people have lots of preconceived notions about.
What are the notions people tend to come in with?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I've heard everything.
I mean, other than I have to be an athlete to get it.
So from the patient point of view, there's preconceived notions of, yeah, like, oh, I'm not an athlete, so I shouldn't go to that person. Or they only can deal in pain. Or I love the one where people tell me, well, I go to a traditional acupuncturist. Like the sports medicine all of a sudden just gets rid of all of the baseline, like pulse and tongue and all that, where you base everything off of what your Chinese medicine diagnosis is. And then you're also looking at it from a Western medical point of view of like, what's working, what's not working, why is their pain coming from where it's coming from? And then you're also looking at things from understanding the diagnosis from the Western medical practitioners and then being able to put your diagnosis back into their language. So when you send your notes back to an ortho that sent somebody to you or a primary care that sent somebody to you, you can't tell them that their qi and blood is stuck and they've got a Shen disturbance because they won't know what you're talking about. So you've got to be able to put it back in their language of like what you're doing, what you're working on. And that's kind of where I think that certain courses that you can take throughout, like with different people that are training throughout the US, really help you do that. Like if you're not familiar with that world, if you don't come from a sports background as a practitioner, it helps you learn how to just decipher your own language so that you can talk to other practitioners. And I think that's a big part of when you say you do sports medicine acupuncture, so you specialize in sports medicine, it's being able to have those conversations with Western medical practitioners.
So you've got two lenses that you can really bring to this. You've got your air quotes traditional, whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that one means.
Yeah, whatever that one means. And you've got Western physiology, Western anatomy, all that kind of thing. So you can bring both of these, it's like being bilingual. Do you find that being able to talk to the referring doctors in their language is helpful for your business?
Yes, because I often hear from patients when someone's referred them to me, whether it's a chiropractor, a PT, a doctor, that people will say, oh, I've tried acupuncture before. And they're like, no, he's different. So in their minds, the referring provider, because of the sports medicine language I've been able to talk to them in, they look at me as a different entity, like almost like I'm floating between acupuncture and dry needling or PT, like I'm kind of floating in this in-between world. I don't think I am, but to them I am. And if that helps them differentiate me for business purposes to make a patient feel more comfortable seeing me, then so be it. Like, that's great. If that helps them kind of with the referral to get somebody to come in the door to help them with their issue or their pain.
Yeah. Well, you need to speak people's language. I mean, I know there's a modern acupuncture clinic down the street from me, which is kind of a walk-in. It's next to Glamour Nails. It's in between Glamour Nails and TJ Maxx at the strip mall. And I'm so glad that they're up there because these are people that are not going to walk in my clinic. They're not going to seek me out. I'm a little too, like, acupuncture? Like, that's weird. But if you walk out of Glamour Nails and it's right next to you, how weird could that be? It's more normalized in a way. So there's like plenty of room for lots of different people.
And I think that that's one of the misconceptions or sometimes the snobbery that happens in our profession, where people think that acupuncture has to be a certain thing. It has to be the traditional ways and you can't break from that, and it has to be very rigid. And maybe it was the way I was trained at school, but I was exposed to so many different styles where I went to school.
Where did you go to school that you got so many? Mm-hmm.
I went to Tri-State College. So, Mark Seam, his...
Oh, he was a little out of the box anyway.
Yeah, so he was always looking at things, like he was really big on teaching you Travell. Like Travell was part of our core knowledge. The trigger point manual was part of our core knowledge, and very heavy palpation based. But then he brought other people back in. I learned Japanese styles of acupuncture. I learned Kiko Matsumoto was there for the whole time, like doing weekends with her. We had just other people came through that were really talented practitioners. So you were exposed to a lot. Laurie Deshar was another one that was there that you were learning from her. So you saw these different styles so people could kind of gravitate whichever way they wanted to go. And for me, the palpation part of it and looking at things from like, as being an athlete my whole life is like, oh, that's an injury I can heal. Oh man, that would have been good to know when I was in my 20s, So that's why I think I gravitated more towards the physical medicine of releasing trigger points and palpation based. And then right after school, I don't even think I had been graduated for 6 months yet. And I went right into Matt Callison's sports medicine acupuncture year-long training course. And I think that took what I already was doing with palpation to a whole nother level, because you started doing cadaver dissections and looking at the body and needling into a cadaver and seeing what the tissue is that you're in and seeing where the needle depth, the safety for the needle depth for some of these structures that we're always kind of taught to fear. But when you see like how much room you really have in certain areas and then where you really need to get to, sometimes way deeper than you think, to get to the point or to get to the fibers of the muscle to release, that's when you start to go, there's more that I can do than just superficial kind of needling here. And that's where I think that my practice really, for myself, got really interesting. And that's where I really started going from like, hey, I'll treat everything. Because when you first come out of school, you're just desperate for clients, right? So for patients. So you're like, I'll treat everything.
I'll treat everything. Plus, we have this idea, and I think a lot of us have this idea. I know I did and had to get disabused of it. This is an amazing medicine, and I can treat anything. This can treat anything.
Right.
And maybe, but it doesn't mean that I can treat it.
Right. That was the big part I had to come to terms with. Is like, people are like, oh, you could treat this. And I still just get people all the time that reach out to me about certain things. And I'm like, I have like a 30% success rate with that. But I know all these other people that are really good at it. So go see them. Like, I'd rather you see them and get the help you need. And sometimes it's my own patients, especially like things like fertility. Like, I worked for someone for a little while doing fertility right out of school. And I really just treated all their pain patients. But I learned a lot from them. And I tell people all the time, like, I could help you with regulating your cycle, helping you with some basic stuff. But if it's anything complicated, you've been trying for a while, go see a specialist. Here's 6 names of people I really trust and respect, and pick one because they're all going to help you out, you know? And I think that all of us finding our lanes and knowing when to refer out, whether it's to Western medicine or to each other, is just super important.
It really is. I think the medicine is that broad, but I don't know very many people that are that broad. We have the things that we enjoy. We have the things that, like in your case, it catches your interest. Hands-on, you're already an athlete, right? You come across Matt Callison's stuff, and it's like, whoa, universe opens up in a whole different way.
Yeah, I had a conversation a couple years ago. I started getting referrals from a lot of doctors, and it was all pain stuff. So it's stuff within my wheelhouse. But it was all pain stuff that was at the end of treatment from everything else. And they were mostly people that had multiple comorbidities. They were basically surgical candidates, and they didn't want surgery. So the doctors were sending them to me as a last resort. Like, oh, go see Darren. He's able to, get people out of pain. And they come in you, and you look at their file, and you talk to them, and you do the palpation, and you're like, wow, you're a surgical candidate. Like, I don't know if anything I'm going to do is going to help this. And they're like, well, how long is it going to take? And you have to be honest. And you're like, once or twice a week for, I don't know, 16 to 120 weeks. Like, I don't know. You might be doing this the rest of your life, like to stay out of pain because you are bone on bone or you've got these other issues. And it's a hard conversation to have because people are looking at you with these eyes of like, you're the miracle worker. You're the last resort. You're going to wave your wand and I'm going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And it was burning me out. Like, it was really a frustrating year with some of those providers. And I had to have a conversation with a couple of them and be like, I really appreciate you sending these people, but I'm not the one that can solve this for them. And
yeah, I'm not the right tool for the job.
And it was hard. It was a hard conversation because you also don't want to, annoy your referral resource and have them mad at you and have them, it's,
yeah.
So
you had to kind of educate them. Here's the scope that I'm helpful in. Here's the scope I'm not. Did they learn from that? I mean, did they accept that or?
Yeah, for the most part. Some of them did. Some of them were just like, oh, I've sent him 3 people and he told him all he couldn't help them and he told me he couldn't help them. So maybe, I'll look somewhere else for it. I've been very fortunate that I have a full roster. With some things, it's very preventative, and it seems with orthopedics and sports medicine, it's very much reactionary. Like, I get patients that most of my patients are coming to me, last resort, in pain, looking to be out of pain for something, whether it's an event, a run. I've got college athletes, I've got people that are competitive in other sports. Some people that I've had, the people that are the Nordic skiers for the Olympic team, I've had some of them come down to help them get through their seasons. And those are athletes that you can have a conversation with, and they've got a set date they need to be ready for, or they've got their next event. And that's kind of easier because it's planning. It's like, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z to get you ready by this time. And you've got a team that's working with you. The harder part is when you've got patients that are coming in with aches and pains and they say, hey, I want to feel better. And you have to decipher what that means to them.
Right. What does better mean?
Does that mean you're able to do the things you love, or does it mean you want no pain? Because sometimes the no pain is not necessarily reality with whatever injuries they've had, their age, their level of activity. I guess some of it's just the conversations you have to have at the outside is like, okay, what's this mean to you, and what do you want to accomplish?
Those are super important. So often the tacit agreement of medicine is patients have a problem. They're going to go to a practitioner who understands that problem. They're going to fix it. That's how it works. Sometimes, I'm sure you have these conversations with your patients. I know I do. They're runners. They love to run. Running is what keeps them sane in a way. They're very woody kinds of people. And they're having trouble with their running because they keep pushing in ways that their body just won't do it anymore. It's like you can't not have the conversation.
I've definitely had people come to me that they're like, oh, I went and saw, this provider, whether it was acupuncture, and they told me I can't do this anymore. And that will drive me nuts. So how do I get to still do the running, the rowing, the skiing, whatever it is, so I don't lose my mind? And I will have that conversation in a way that I'm not saying no. I'm not shutting you down, but I'm going to have that conversation like, hey, you might need to rest the next 48 hours after this treatment. And then I want you to go out, do a walk run. I know you usually run 6 miles, but do a walk run for 1 mile to 2 miles. See how it goes. If you're feeling pain, back it off. And I tell a lot of my I say older patients, and that means anyone from 35 to 70, 35, anyone from 35 on. I'm looking at you, an older patient, because, you look at natural degeneration of the spine starts to happen. So I look at them as
I love it. That's hilarious.
I'm like, most of them are not looking to win the Olympics at that point. They're not looking to win. They're not getting drafted by the NFL. They're not going, you're past 35. So what are you going to try to ruin your body for at that point? And if you need to miss one race, or you need to miss one workout so that you can do this for the rest of your life, I think most of them respect that. I'm like, hey, we're not shutting you down forever, but we're taking you down for a little while because you're in recovery mode before you get back into performance mode. And most of them will relate to that.
Yeah, recovery is a big piece of it. And especially over 35, I think it's so notable in your life. You don't recover the way that you used to recover. And would you say in some ways that recovery is part of what the training is?
What I like to tell patients is, and I like to kind of explain to them the yin and yang principle. And I say, if you've been yang for your whole sports life and everything's been heavy workouts, heavy pushing, heavy performance levels, and you're just burning yourself down, I go, as we get from 35 older, we have to start putting a yin principle into our training. So we have to start doing yoga, or you have to start doing qigong, or you have to have at least 1 day a week where you're shutting yourself down and starting to kind of nourish the internal elements of your body, whether it's through meditation and I find that as we get older, as I start to deal with patients in their 50s and 60s and 70s, I'm like, you have to up that. That's got to be 3 days a week and 2 days of lifting, or 2 days of heavy running, or whatever their activity is, hiking. I have a lot of hikers in Vermont where I live, and they will not stop hiking. And it's a great activity you can do for a very long time, especially as you get older. So you have to be like, hey, that's great, but while you're hiking, try walking meditation. Use the hike as part of your internal, and I'll try to point them in directions like that, just because if they're constantly burning and they're never nourishing, it doesn't matter how much I do with needles or try to get them to recover, you're not going to get the same results.
I really love how these very basic Chinese medicine ideas, yin yang, it can be so simple and practical.
When I think everybody thinks, especially because I do a lot of trigger point work and I do so much palpation, people think it has to be this really complicated diagnosis process. And honestly, I still go to the basic things. Is it yin or yang? Is it internal, external? Is it hot or cold? Is it excess or deficiency? And that folds right into the way a lot of my influence in the last 5 to 7 years has not, besides Toby's stuff with Sam, which was a whole different light up my world. That was awesome because I started looking at things that I hadn't felt comfortable necessarily treating some of the internal stuff that I'd be like, I don't know what to do with that information. I know what to do with the muscle pain, but this other information over here, I'm not sure to do it. And so like looking at SOM, that started to put some of those patterns into the musculoskeletal stuff. And I was able to use, and I still use a lot of SOM as my root treatment for things.
What kinds of things were you seeing? What kinds of patterns were showing up that you either you hadn't seen or you didn't know what to do with?
A lot of the stuff with the gallbladder channel and the pericardium balancing, I looked at more of like a liver excess, not thinking of it as a gallbladder excess with a pericardium deficiency, right? So I'd be like, oh, this is liver chi stagnation. It's a liver excess, and this person's very woody and blah, 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 blah. Instead of looking at it as like, hey, the liver's depressed, the gallbladder's excess. And I think that Toby talking about like liver excess being more like a depression and gallbladder excess being more of an anger thing, if I remember kind of the way we were talking about it, and talking about the gallbladder being the warrior, right? Like the sword, running with the sword. And I think that for me, that set off a light bulb for so many of my athletes who are, they're warriors, they're modern day warriors, right? And they are gallbladder excess and then they're coming at people and, I treat a lot of hockey players. I treat a lot of lacrosse players. I treat a lot of people that are like, they're aggressive. Like I used to treat a ton of rugby players because I played rugby for years. And you're talking about people that are literally just going after people. A lot of that was the gallbladder excess. But then what fascinated me is you talk to other patients who have this quietness to them where their voice hasn't been heard. And they've got like this subtle, like deep level anger to them that you haven't. And that was like a gallbladder deficiency. I didn't look at a gallbladder deficiency before, like besides like a channel stagnation or whatever. And that to me was some of the stuff from SOM that really showed. And then the bladder heart combination, like knowing when someone's got like all of these symptoms that are in the back and they might seem like it's bladder channel stagnation. But if you dive deeper, it's really like a heart deficiency, or it's a heart excess and a bladder deficiency. And like kind of teasing that out with patients, where before that, when I was doing more of like a APM style acupuncture physical medicine, like I learned in Mark Seams, a lot of it, that is zone based, right? So it's Tai Yang zone, Xiao Yang zone, Yang Ming zone. And you would do something to open that up. And Mark was fascinating with his like the looking at the emotions with stuff. But as a student, you learn that. And as you get a practitioner, sometimes you forget that. You forget that there's this whole emotional element. And I thought that when I learned SOM, that brought that back forefront for me. So that's where I really get to look at both those things. And your results go through the roof when you're looking at both the physical and the emotional, in my opinion.
For sure. I mean, they're so entangled. The other thing that I have found about the SOM perspective, as you were talking, the way it pairs organs together is different than in the traditional TCM, right? Traditionally, the yang of the lung would be the large intestine. In SOM, it's still in that first circuit, but it's the stomach instead. And then it pairs the large intestine with the spleen, or as like you were just talking, pericardium and gallbladder, which it just gives you a whole other lens for looking at how things counterbalance each other. We often learn in acupuncture school about, oh, that's liver yang rising. Well, here's the thing. If you think about the liver, it's Yin, so it's yin, and it's wood. It's wood yin. And so it's like it doesn't go out. It goes in. It's the yang side of the wood, the xiao yang, that goes outwards. And once you start, I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. Again, these are all different perspectives. And like you were saying with the way that Mark Seam worked and looking at the different channels like the Xiaoyang or the Tai Yin or whatever, and treating that way, it's just another way of looking at how things are possibly connected together. And weirdly for me with the SOM, for some reason, I've been able to see more into what the psychoemotive aspects are that connects with the physiology. I don't know why that is, but for me, it just seems to be a window into that.
And I think that's so not to like keep bringing up Mark Seam, but when I first was looking at acupuncture schools and I decided to go to Tri-State, at the time there were 3 main acupuncture schools in the Jersey, New York area. There was a PCOM campus, there was The one in Montclair, New Jersey, I want to say, was it called Eastern or something like that? I forget the name of it. But I was looking at different schools, and I'd gone to all their open houses. And Mark was talking, and I don't remember if it was that or like the first like welcome to the school. But he made a comment, and he said, on your deathbed, whatever you were meant to know of Chinese medicine is what you're going to know of Chinese medicine. And I was like, God, that's liberating. Because there's so much to know, and you could go in so many directions. And I was just like, oh, awesome. That takes all the pressure off. I don't have to know it all. I'm going to go with whatever resonates with me. And there's no right or wrong way to treat anything. You know, there's practitioners that can use one needle and treat everything in the body. You know, there's Shudodemi can barely touch the body with a needle, and he can solve half the issues in your body. You know, and it's amazing, like when you watch practitioners like that. I'm not that practitioner. I'm not that good. I use a lot of needles. In the sense, like I treat at the root. I use a lot of needles. Sometimes I, trigger point something and get a twitch response. Other times the patient might be deficient, or I know they're needle sensitive, and I'll use, and I kind of butcher this terminal thing. I think it's PIC is the multiple needles in a line technique. I think it's PAICI, something like that. But that's something I learned from Matt Callison, and that's something, you use multiple needles in a line, go into and you'd be amazed at how many times the tension just dissolves. And you don't need to get a local twitch response with that.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR designed to help practitioners run their business without running around. Managing a practice can mean juggling more tools than you ever planned to. One for booking, one for documentation, another for billing. Each solves a small part of the puzzle, but because they don't work together, the manual admin still adds up. Jane helps practitioners connect their core tools all in one place. Payments are taken and recorded directly into Jane. Jane Websites helps new patients find your clinic online, and if something needs attention, Jane's support team is available by phone, email, or chat with an understanding of how your entire system works together. For added peace of mind, Jane includes privacy and security features like two-step verification, role-based access levels, and HIPAA and PPDA compliance, so you can feel confident your practice and patients' data are protected. To learn more about how Jane can support you, your patients, and your business, head to jane.app/demo. And if you're ready to get started, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. I'm not sure it's about not being that good, whatever that means. As you were saying, there's lots of different ways of working. In some ways, the trick, if there is a trick, is to figure out what's the way that you like to work. What's the way that enlivens you? What's the thing that catches your attention, has you being interested in people and how you can help them? And yeah, for some people, it's really super light touch. For other people, it's more heavy-handed. I think it has more to do with who we are and what interests us. Because otherwise, how do you pay attention to people if you're not looking through your own sense of interest?
There was a great quote I had years ago when I was a student, and we were in grand rounds. And Dennis Mosman was I guess he was the president of the school at the time, or the dean. I guess he was the dean of Tri-State. And someone raised their hand and said, well, what style do you practice, Dr. Mosman? And he said, oh, that's a good question. He's like, because I'm a chiropractor and I've studied Japanese and I've studied under Mark. And he's like, so I practice Mosman style. And I just thought it was like such a great comment, because unless you really are rigid and you only do exactly what your teacher taught you, if you go out and learn Sam and Kiko and traditional Chinese medicine and then 5-element stuff and then learn how to do trigger point release, like you're taking your own perspective and your own life to that treatment. I can't say that I'm doing something that anyone else is doing, and it doesn't make it better, worse, or anything like that. It's just what I know and what I do, and as you said, what I bring to the table. I like to treat. There are days I do lots of muscle work, and then there's days I feel like a lot of people just need nourishment, and you do very little muscle work, or I'll do more E-stim, or I'll do more auricular acupuncture. And I was very heavy-handed when I first got out of school, a lot of trigger point work, because I thought that's what patients needed. And as I've been practicing now 14 years, and I think that now I've realized things change, like, and I change. And there's times where I'm like, oh, this person needs more auricular acupuncture. And I've studied with Jeremy Steiner for the past few years. And I think that that's awesome for some people. And some people, they need that plus the local needling, and I think that, I don't know, I just find it, if I was only doing one style all the time, I would probably get bored and I probably wouldn't get the same results for my patients if I didn't have this plethora of styles to choose from.
Even if you just choose one style, like I'm going to go deep in whatever lineage kind of thing or method. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to talk about it. But if you only do what your teacher showed you, then you'll never find out what you're capable of figuring out on your own. Patients challenge us all the time. I mean, my sense of what I think I know in clinic is constantly up for investigation because people come in and I'm like, I'm not sure what this is. Sometimes they come in and I look at them and I know exactly what they need, and that's fun, right? It feels good. Oh, I'm kind of getting this down. Oh, I think I'm understanding acupuncture. This feels good to me as a practitioner. But really more often people come in, I'm scratching my head and like you're saying, I'm back to some basics. Are they blood deficient? Is there an excess condition? Are they hot? Are they cold? Those are such important rubrics to pay attention to because if you go heavy-handed with somebody and they've got a deficiency, they're going to get worse.
Oh, I've made that mistake. You misread the thing. You're like, oh, this is an excess pattern. And it really turns out to be a deep deficiency that you just missed. Or there's a trauma hidden that you weren't aware of. Like it didn't come up in their conversation. They didn't report it to you. They might not even remember it. It could have been something from their childhood. And there's a big emotional release. And you're like, oh, that was hidden. Like, dang, I missed that one. And then you have to ground them. And you've got to take the time to undo whatever's they're worked up from and take it back down. And that is one of the challenges with doing muscle work. And if you've ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it really talks a lot about trauma being hidden in muscles. And when you're doing, especially for a lot of people in their low back, when you're working around the kidneys and you're working around the QL and the rector spinae and even the deep multifidi in people's low backs, you can tell almost right away when you're touching them because they'll have like an involuntary twitch or flinch when you're palpating it. And that's a good sign to know, like, hey, I probably need to calm them more. Like whether it's doing like a Buddha's triangle, like on someone's wrist, or doing something in their ear, Shenmen or something like that to calm them, or doing a kidney point on their ground. Sometimes kidney one's great to just ground them before you work in that area, because I've seen it happen where people have a massive reaction when you're trying to get into the deeper muscles just because they've been holding something there so long. And I think that that's something to always be aware of. Not to dive too deep into it, but that's one of the things I struggle with colleagues of mine who are PTs or athletic trainers when they're doing dry needling on people, because they're not getting that training. So if they go into someone's low back and that person gets wound up, what grounding techniques do they have? Or do they be like, oh, well, yeah, you'll be sore for a little bit. Don't worry about it. And then you've got someone that's like emotionally worked up. And I think that is something that we need to have, if we're talking to colleagues about that, be like, hey, be aware of that. Like, be aware. And I have a lot of friends of mine up here who are PTs who dry needle, and they send me their complicated patients, or they'll send me things that they're not comfortable needling. And we work together a lot. And I think that that's important, so they know when they're uncomfortable, to send it to me. Like, I'm comfortable doing that, or I can work through that with that person, instead of it being like a hard line of like, well, you're stepping into my territory. And I held that line a long time ago. I held that line, and I realized that it was not a fight that benefited really anyone.
Tell me more about that, because I think many people still carry that torch, and there's still turf wars. And I think increasingly, as different kinds of practitioners who are looking to help people get better discover that, hey, a few needles used in a particular way can be very, very useful, I think we'll probably see more and more, let's call them allied practitioners, or other practitioners who, they're looking to help their patients. They're going to do something that looks like acupuncture. How do we approach that? Is acupuncture something we own? Or does acupuncture own us and we have a certain responsibility to help others learn it in ways that benefit their patients? You're just talking about some PTs. Oh, it's tight here in the lower back. Great, we're just going to go at it. You might have the perspective because you've got the Chinese medicine background. Oh, there's something in here. Let's be cautious. There might be a landmine here. Let's bring that into the treatment.
I think that because I have a lot of, going back to the gallbladder channel, I have a lot of gallbladder excess with, just kind of been that warrior mentality my whole life. So I think at first with the dry needling acupuncture battle, I was very much like, we need to fight this. We need to go. We need to take this as our own. And I think the mistake that as a profession we made was people were focused on the needle. Those are acupuncture needles. Well, we didn't focus on the cups when we said those are cupping, and we didn't focus on the tool for gua sha when Graston and everything else started doing that technique, but we were holding strong on the needle. And the mistake we made was nobody cares about the needle saying it's an acupuncture needle or not, because they could just relabel it as a dry needling needle and boom, we've solved that problem. Where we messed up was we should have focused on the retention. The retention of a needle. So if you look at Travell and you look at a lot of what Travell talked about, she would do an injection, right? So that's where dry needling, a lot of people don't even know where the term dry needling came from. Travell would do an injection into the muscle, a hypodermic needle going in and injecting, hence wet needling. She then discussed acupuncturists and osteopaths and other people that she was working with would report getting the same reaction with their solid filiform needles, hence a dry needle. When dry needling first started, they tried to call it all types of things, like in deep intermuscular stimulation and all these different things. Dry needling is what they ended up settling on because it was probably the easiest thing for people to know, and it was an easy term to remember, and it was good branding, what have you. So if a practitioner like a PT or athletic trainer, chiropractor, somebody that's not an acupuncturist is going in and they're sticking needles in, if they were going in and getting a local twitch response, trigger pointing and then pulling out and throwing out, technically that would be much closer to what Travell was doing with the hypodermic needles. And therefore you could say, okay, that's closer to trigger point stimulation. They're not doing it. But the science has come out saying that you don't need a local twitch response to get the same. So now you've got PTs who have done dry, there's studies that say in dry needling, you don't need a local twitch response like Travell talked about. You can just get it into the tight band and it'll dissolve after 5, 10, 15 minutes. Well, it sounds a lot more like acupuncture.
Sounds a lot like acupuncture.
Right. So now you've really crossed the line, but at the same time, their studies are showing, hey, our dry needling techniques have changed from doing twitch response to we don't need a twitch response.
Way more comfortable for the patient too.
Right. And they're not as sore afterwards. And so like I've walked into athletic training rooms and there's multiple college athletes laying there with needles in, and there's not an acupuncturist in the room. It's all athletic trainers. And you're like, okay, like that's acupuncture all over the place. So then you have to decide, are you going to fight that with them? Because if you're sharing patients with that person, if you're sharing patients with that institution, is it worth the fight? And to me, it wasn't. It was worth the discussion and opening that discussion and saying, hey, what you're doing when you're retaining needles there is way closer to acupuncture. And they'd be like, yeah, you're right. And I'd be like, well, let's have a conversation about where I can benefit you and help those athletes when you're not getting the responses you need to. Because everybody wants to be a one-stop shop, right? Like athletes, patients, they don't want to go to 4 different practitioners. They don't want to have to pay 4 different copays. They want to go one place to feel better. And if that means they go to a PT and that PT is like, hey, I can do myofascial release, I can do strength exercises, and I can do some needling to get this muscle to change, the patient's probably going to end up going there first. And I think that that's where we have to look long term with the profession is like, how do we integrate better in facilities? If we're treating pain, how do we integrate better into bigger facilities and work? I like being my own boss. I don't want to necessarily have to go to a hospital or someplace else and them telling me I can't take time off when I want it and I can't do this and I can't do that. So the long term with the dry needling argument, I think these days is some states are outlawing it still, but I think it's a tough battle. And I think that you're going against, I don't want people to think that they just have to quit and give up, but I think it's more about how do we integrate and work together versus fight, because I spent a lot of energy and wasted a lot of energy fighting many years ago. And I feel like I didn't really benefit from that at all, besides getting very frustrated and very angry.
Would you say that in not fighting, but in some ways like taking almost a mentorship sort of role with other practitioners that are using needles, that it has expanded your business?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it doesn't come across as like, I have PTs that call me sometimes like, hey, I've got someone that's got something going on in their intercostals. Like, can you do that for me? And I'm like, yeah, not a problem. Because I've done it so many times. Or like someone's broken a rib and releasing the intercostals. There's no room for error when you're doing the intercostals. And I've released them many times on people. You got to take your time. You got to be confident. And a lot of that came from doing the cadaver work with the SMAC program. Seeing really how deep I am and where the intercostals are and where like kind of getting that range of like that range of depth and knowing that range of depth. So there's stuff like that where colleagues, if they wouldn't send them to me if they thought I was going to steal their patient, but they know that I'm not going to steal their patient. They're coming to me for a little bit of work and then I'm going to send them back to them. And I think that is, if you're trying to be in the sports medicine world or you're trying to be in pain management world, you've got to do that. You don't want to like try to trash the person that sent them to you. And you want to just be open and be like, hey, you're going to go back to them now and get strong. Like after we've released this tension, like I could prescribe PT exercises. Part of the SMAC program is learning PT exercises, but I don't stay up to speed on that. I rather send them to someone that's really, really good at doing those exercises and focusing on it.
Yeah. It's great to be able to focus on the stuff that has our interest and use other practitioners where they're focusing on their interest. You know, again, the point you make about patients would love to be able to go to one shop and get it all done. I mean, that's great if you can. But I mean, sometimes you just need to work with other people. I know for myself, there's certain things I'm just not interested in working on. Like I'm not that interested in doing fertility. I see certain patients for it sometimes because, I don't know, for whatever reason, they want to see me about it. But I prefer to refer it out to people who are deep in that.
Right. Yeah. I feel like fertility, for me, the way I look at it is it's so important to the person trying to get pregnant. And they're putting so much stress on themselves to get pregnant. And I don't want to waste their time or their money. You know, most insurance doesn't cover it for that. I know it's so stressful when you're trying to go through that process for everybody involved. And sending them to the right person where they're getting the right nourishment, they're getting the right treatment, they're feeling the changes right away. I'd rather send them to the experts on that rather than trying to like fumble through it myself and go back and blow the dust off my old fertility books and trying to catch up on it.
Yeah. Well, I find too, especially in the fertility world, there's a whole language around hormones and numbers and this and that. And all the women that are doing any kind of fertility work, they're up to speed on all the languaging and all the tests and all the this and that. I'm not going to keep up with it. And I'm not going to blow the dust off any books to do that because there's too many people that do it really well. I mean, for whatever reason, and I have this sometimes, women come in and they're like, well, I don't want to do IVF. If my body's capable, if we can find a way naturally to make my body capable, I'm up for it. And I'll work with those folks. But when people come in and they bring me all their numbers, it's like, I'm the wrong guy. I'm not the right tool for this job.
Well, I think that's like with anything, right? Like, so with the sports medicine stuff, I've gone to many practitioners over the years because I just don't have many people up here that can release muscles the way I like them released. And so you'll go to a colleague or a friend and they'll say, oh yeah, I know how to release the traps, or I know how to do your lower back, your QL. And you'll go and they don't release it at all. Like, and it's kind of frustrating. And you realize it's, well, because they're not palpating that muscle all day long. They don't know like exactly where that needle needs to go to get the release the first time that you put the needle in. And so I think that just like with fertility, like if you want to do the sports medicine thing, you've got to just do it. Like you've got to get your hands on bodies nonstop all day long, palpation, palpation, palpation. And that's where in the age of CEUs, where we're doing more and more online because it's so easy. It's like less expensive. You can get your continuing education credits. But if someone's not showing you how to palpate that muscle or how to pull that muscle off the body safely and how to like needle into it at the right angle to get that release or to get that band of tissue, you're not going to get the same results. And that's where I think that, Travell said it in her book. She talked about it doesn't matter whether you're doing wet needling or dry needling, who you are as a practitioner. If you're not educated and not getting the training is what matters the most. And so if you're, at Tri-State, we were very lucky that in your training, you had multiple practitioners who were really good at trigger points, pushing on the body of the patient going, this is what you need to feel. And you'd feel that band and they'd be like, and this is the angle of the needle. And you'd do it and it wouldn't work. And you'd be like, no, this is the angle of the needle. This is what you need to put in. And having those hundreds of hours set the base for me to be able to then go on and learn more on my own. But if you're in a clinic and you're like, okay, I took this weekend course and I got to needle this muscle once, but now I got to try it on patients, it's going to take you a lot longer to catch up to that skill level. And I think that that's where, whether you're an acupuncturist who didn't learn it in school and you go to a weekend course, or you're a PT or an athletic trainer and you're just doing a weekend course, and then they're like, oh, do 100 hours of practice and come back for level 2. I feel like that's the difference between the people that are really good at it and the people that are just starting out or just trying to do it like kind of like, oh, once in a while I do this. And I think that's where we're seeing more injuries happen over time, is because from anyone that's needling into it, if you don't have someone showing you exactly what to do, you risk more chances of injury.
Risks are involved. Some points are safer than others. That's for sure.
And if you look at the body, I do a lot of tensegrity. Like that's the way I look at the body. And so
tell us about that for folks that don't quite grok what tensegrity is.
So tensegrity's, if you think of the body as bones stacked up on top of each other, the way that they all stay in place is you have to have even tension on two different structures pulling on the bones or on the landmark. So an example would be, I see it quite often where people come in with neck pain and upper trap pain, rhomboid pain. And everybody they've gone to has worked on the rhomboids, they've worked on the traps, they've worked on the levator, they've worked on the posterior portion. But the issue is not the posterior portion. That's the muscle that's being overstretched. And muscles that are locked long tend to scream more than muscles that are locked short. So if you look at the anterior portion of the body, the pec is locked short, the pec minor is locked short. Sometimes it's the abdominal muscles or the obliques that are pulling them forward because they sit at a desk or they work at a computer. They could have upper cross syndrome where the neck is forward. And if you don't release all of that to give the locked long muscle some relief, they're going to come back in next week, say nothing changed. So a lot of what I do in my practice is looking at what is going on in the body. Like, are they forward? Are they back? Like, why is this issue that no one else has been able to work on? Why haven't they gotten any relief? So when you start to do that and you look at like a muscle like the pec minor, that's right over the rib cage. There's, again, it's kind of like the intercostals. There's not a lot of room for error to try to get into the pec minor and get that to release. So you have to be able to palpate it properly, know that you're over a rib, or be able to lift parts of it off and know where to go with that muscle. Same thing with the serratus anterior. You know, anytime you're working on these, and these are all important muscles, the subscap, like these are all involved in that forward shoulder, forward neck, rolled forward. And if you don't get these to release properly, you're not going to change that. Or the scalenes, another one that so many patients have tight scalenes. When you learn from somebody that can teach you and show you exactly how to do it, you get these amazing results. And patients are so thankful because it's something that they've struggled with for so long and it's been so uncomfortable. And that's the place I like to be in. Like the more complicated stuff, the stuff that's a little bit, you got to really take your time with, but it helps. It really helps.
In clinic, there's no such thing as a small detail. The needle you reach for, the formula you prescribe, the moment you choose to listen just a little bit longer. Your patients place their trust in you, and you deserve to place the same trust in the tools that you use. At Blue Poppy, they hold their products to the same standard that you hold your care. Herbal formulas crafted for efficiency, needles that perform the way you expect them to, clinic essentials that arrive on time. Because when your tools are dependable, your focus stays where it belongs, on your patients. No guesswork, no compromises, just steady support behind the scenes. Blue Poppy, the choice of practitioners since 1982.
It's fun solving difficult puzzles.
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you're saying here too, and I love this phrase, locked long or locked short.
That's not mine. That comes from Tom Meyer's Anatomy Trains.
Okay, thanks, Tom Myers. That is the first time I've heard those terms. But man, oh man, it makes a lot of sense. That if something's locked short, and I've seen this too, patients will often talk about, oh, the problem is here, and they'll point to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of times I will palpate it, and it's like, well, it doesn't feel that bad to me. And I go to the side where they're not complaining about and palpate it. And it's like, oh, okay, you got something here.
If you think to like the mirror treatments, that's what I find fascinating. So if you look at the mirror treatment mentality, it's like, oh, we're going to treat the right arm by the left leg. And if you start to look at some of that and you look at the anatomy involved, and whether you want to look at it through the anatomy trains window of like the different fascial planes that go throughout the body, or you want to look at it just from a musculo-skeletal imbalance, like a postural restoration, like, oh, if the left adductors aren't working, then the pelvis is going to be shifted, and then the right glute's not going to work, and then you've got issues further up the chain. No matter how you want to look at it, it's kind of fascinating when you go back to looking at these mirror treatments where you're like, wait, if they put the needle there for the right bicep or the right shoulder, and you're like, oh, that makes sense, because if you start to come back out to 30,000 feet and look at the whole body, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can see why that. And then other times it makes no sense. And I'm like, wow, that is kind of magical. like sometimes it makes total sense. And other times I'm like, I don't know why when I put that needle there, all of your pain in that total other area disappeared. But again, like these are all, I've had patients where they've had some pain in their body. I've tried everything I know what to do. And then finally I'm like, nothing's worked. Let's try a mirror treatment. And we do this mirror treatment and you find the tight nodule in the mirroring area or joint. And you're like, all right, now walk around. And then you put it in there and they walk around and like, the pain's gone. And you're like, cool. That's usually my response. Awesome. Cool. How does that work? I don't know. I don't fully understand it myself, but it did. So I always tell them that somebody 5,000 years ago who was way smarter than me and was way more in tune with the world figured it out.
Yeah, it is weird how this information has found its way down to us through time. And especially with acupuncture, where there's so many different ways of thinking about and looking at it. And in some ways, I find the modern stuff, Travell's work, right, which the dry needling is based on. And a lot of the, so-called sports acupuncture, whatever that is, right, really looking physiologically. It just seems to me that there are ways the body's put together. I love your term tensegrity. There's ways that the body is tensegritously holding itself in some kind of balance, or tensegritously holding itself in some kind of compensation. It's not optimal, but it gets people to the grocery store, right? You can get around. And yeah, we're always looking for the answers. But I think one of the really interesting things about being an acupuncturist is looking at things and just asking that question, what is this? Like, how did this get in place? Or maybe even more importantly, how's it held in place? And what can I do to let it go? Yeah, there's people from a long time ago that were looking at this, but dude, 500 years ago, I don't think they had filiform needles. It's an even bigger question when you go further back in time, like, okay, fish bones, slivers of bamboo, pieces of stone, your hands that just know what to do. I don't know. A lot of this stuff is lost in like mystical myth.
I often will when I'm going back to talking to doctors, I often will say, look, the people that were the learned people of the time that wrote the first books were Taoists, right? Like that's for acupuncture, they were mostly the Taoists. And their mentality, the way I understand it, is with them being one with nature, it was a poetic kind of writing. And so they used words to describe what was happening in the body, like the feeling of when the chi happens at a needle, like the feeling of a fish on a hook. Or, you needle this point, it's going to be a sensation of rushing water, or they'll feel like whatever the different phrases are. And I tell doctors all the time, like, just like the early medical books were written in Greece, and the language they used is not what you necessarily would use today to describe the same issue. But if you release a trigger point in somebody, or you go into certain points in the body and you feel that rush, like that sensation of either blood flow to the area, or you feel like a opening, or you feel a referral pattern go, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's what they were getting at that point when they needled it. And I think that just stepping back and looking sometimes at like, oh, this is the learned people of the time used the language of the time, and it might not make sense to us now, but if you step back, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I could see why they called that point whatever the title, whatever the name is. And because when I needle that point, the person always feels a sensation go down their leg, and that's really cool.
Tells you something about physiology. You mentioned, we were talking a little earlier about Saam and how it changed things for you. And are you still using it in conjunction with?
Oh, yeah.
How does that fit in with like trigger point work or other kinds of things that you do? What's that look like?
So I can't say that I use it in the way that most Saam enthusiasts who are very kind of strict with it would be happy with, maybe. I don't know, like just because I don't use it as like strictly like these 4 points are going to be used and then I'm going to let them sit and that's the treatment. Okay, first let me just tell you a really funny 4-point needle story from acupuncture school, and this will kind of clue you into the way I think. We were in a pain clinic. My partner and I were in a pain clinic, and we told our teacher that we were only going to use 4-needle technique that night for every patient that came in. And she's like, great. And she comes over after like we've treated 2 or 3 patients, and she's like, let me see your notes. Like, what did you guys do for this? And we're like using like 16 to 20 needles on every patient. And she's like, I thought you guys were using 4 needles on everybody. And we're like, yeah, we used 4 needles for this, and we used 4 needles for that, and we used 4 needles for this. She's like, that's not the way 4-needle technique works. And we're like, what? Really? She's like, 4-needle technique is 4 needles, nothing else. And we're like, oh, well, yeah, we used 20-needle technique then. It's like that was. So if I'm truly just looking at somebody from a Saam perspective, and I'm like, okay, I might just use 4 or 8 needles, depending on what's going on with them. And I might really do nothing else. But when I'm looking at it as like, hey, this person has liver excess, I might do liver 4 and liver 2 on them, right? And start to see if it shifts the pulse. If it shifts the pulse, I might add in the rest of the Saam part, or I might not. I might just then go throw in triple burner 2 and triple burner 3 because the problem is up in along their triple burner channel, and I might treat it like that. So I would go opposite side of the issue. Or if it's a man, I might do the left, or if it's a woman, I might do the right, or if it's because it's a liver, I'm trying to calm the liver, I might put the liver points on the right and then the triple burner on the left, if that's opposite side of the pain issue. Then once the pulse is kind of calmed down and the person's more relaxed, then I might go in locally and be like, okay, what needles do I have to do to get this musculo-skeletal thing to change? So that's how I'll use Saam a lot of times, because I know that it's going to be the most powerful way to change the pulse and to change the overall structure of what's going on. And then I still will use local needles to relax the tissue that is bound up that they need to. Maybe that's just me being an impatient person and knowing that I would like to feel better faster, that I'm like, hey, I can do the baseline, but I can also go in locally and shift some of this tension that the person's feeling. And I just find that is my own kind of way I like to use Saam sometimes. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to use more of a traditional like 4 gates, or inner and outer gates, like liver 3 and large intestine 4, and then spleen 9 and lung 5. And I might be using that combination to move chi throughout the body and then go in locally. Depends. But if the pulse doesn't shift with certain things, I'm always looking to shift the pulse first.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking for a global effect from the acupuncture that you're doing, whether that's some kind of 4 gates like thing, whether it's 4 needle sa'am or even just 2 needle sa'am, and because you can also work it that way. You're looking to get some kind of global shift so that the body's shifting, changing, and then go in locally to clean things up.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that came from working with Matt Callison and I TA'd for him, and having a lot of conversations with him over the years and understanding that, I think he would say, like, if you just do the musculo-skeletal needling, you can probably get someone about 80% better, which is pretty good. But if you really want to get them that extra 20%, you got to look at it from a TCM perspective or whatever your root perspective is. Let's just call it TCM for ease.
I like hearing you say root perspective. Whatever your root perspective is, TCM is one. There's a lot of perspectives that you could call a root perspective.
Right.
And like whatever floats your boat, whatever you like to use, wherever you get the changes in the pulse or the tongue or whatever your markers are. This is one of the really cool things about acupuncture. You got the thing that's kind of your thing, like use it.
And I think that for me is what is so crucial to what we're doing. And that's why sometimes I laugh when people will be like, oh, well, I go to a traditional acupuncturist, not like you. Or like, I go to someone that does traditional this or that. And I'm like, I always laugh because I'm like, cool. Like, that's great. If that's the way you understand me, that's okay. But I'm always I take pulse on everyone. I just do. I look at it. I don't always look at the tongue, and I don't do herbs. I use herbs on myself. I use herbs on my kids, but I don't prescribe herbs to people. I didn't get my herbal license because it was 2 more years at Tri-State. It was, 2 years afterwards, and I figured I'd always go back, and then I moved from New York to Vermont. So I never went back and got my herbal license. So I don't do a ton of tongue with my patients, except if I don't know what the heck's going on with them. I might look at the tongue. I might be like, oh, pulse isn't giving me anything. The intake's not giving me anything. You're not responding to treatments. Like, what else is going on? You might look at the tongue, be like, oh, okay, there's more dampness than I thought, or oh, there's a damp heat, or there's stagnation. It might be a tiebreaker for me for something, like if I'm in the pulse or whatever, and that's the way I use tongue. But yeah, I think that overall, whatever your method of treatment is, if you can use it to get people better, like, so be it. It doesn't have to be, there's no right or wrong way to treat people in the sense of, one modality versus the other.
Well, I suspect there's wrong ways to treat people, and I've made people worse. So
I don't mean it like that. I meant like, just as like, there's, people, I mean more like, oh, I only do Kiko, or I only do TCM, or I only do this. And if that's what works for you, like I had a friend of mine once who said, if somebody can take large intestine 4 and treat everything in the body, and they've like just embodied that point and they can do it, like, so be it. They don't need to learn anything else if they don't want to. But if other people, like, I'm kind of a nerd in the sense that I want to learn all types of cool stuff. Like, I want to look at things and take different classes and learn. So that's just the way I've always been.
Well, there's certainly plenty of perspectives to go investigate. I mean, we're so lucky that way. 30, 40 years ago, there was TCM and people barely knew that. Like, actually, there's some of the Worsley stuff was here too. I mean, those were the 2 big things with acupuncture. But yeah, these days there is such a feast of different perspectives. And I agree with you. It's not like one's wrong and one's right. There's just what's the flavor that you like, and what are you able to take and enjoy enough in the exploration of it to be able to understand it. Because like you're saying with, for example, needling into tissues that you want to release, you need to spend time exploring those tissues and exploring the angles and how you get things to work. You can't take a weekend anything and get any kind of mastery. Maybe you get an insight, but man, it takes a long time to actually understand the tool well enough to be able to use it. I don't know about you. It takes me a long time to learn a technique, and I have to spend some concerted effort not to slide back into other things that have already worked for me when I'm trying to learn something new. How do you do it? What do you do to move into a new territory?
Well, I've definitely had colleagues tell me, like, if you're going to move into a new territory, only do that territory. Like, don't use any of your other stuff that works. And I've never had the guts to do that because I wanted to keep my practice open, and I was afraid that if I moved into something new, nobody would get results for a while until I was good at it.
And then you should not be charging them. You should be paying them.
Right. So I look at it as, when I'm trying to do something new, I look at it as, okay, I'm maybe for the root, I'm not going to do anything like with SOM was an example. When I first started doing that and trying that, I wouldn't use much else. I would use SOM, but then I might release the trap, or I might release the pec, or I might release the local tissue, but I would just use SOM. I wouldn't mess with any other points. I would just use that always as the root and see how the person felt, after 15 minutes or so, and 15, 20 minutes, I would be like, okay, how do you feel? Great. Okay, now let's work on the musculo-skeletal injury. And if everything was shifted and you could feel the tissue was lighter, you're like, awesome, that's cool. But you have to just embrace it. And I think that when I don't know, it's kind of a tough thing to tell people, is like, oh, you just have to go for it. Because when you're talking about musculoskeletal stuff, there are elements that are very scary, because the last thing you want to do is go into someone's lung or go into their kidney or their bladder or get an artery, and that's very terrifying for a lot of practitioners. When I've TA'd for the sports medicine acupuncture program, there's some people that can palpate and they go right after it. And then other schools, they were taught to needle very lightly. And so you want them to needle into something that's 3 inches deep in the body, and they won't go more than, half a sun. And you're like, no, you have to go deep. You're not going to affect it. Oh, no, I'm affecting it. You're like, no, you literally have to get into this deep point, and this person has a lot of adipose tissue. So you need a needle that's over 3 inches long to get through all the adipose tissue into that deeper point. And some people are just very, very timid about that, which is understandable. It's kind of scary at first. That's why I go back to like the palpation is so key, and having someone show you and work through it with you while you're nervous till you feel that, and they can show you what to do for that. If I was starting again, like if right now was like, oh, I want to get into sports medicine, one of the first things I would do is probably take one of the cadaver labs. There's cadaver labs that's through the sports medicine acupuncture program. There's some other people that are doing them throughout the country, and it's acupuncturists doing cadaver labs and showing you the meridians, showing you the structures, showing you the safety, like letting you do them with them and cut through. And that's what taught me the most, I would say, is being able to be hands-on with cadavers. And it's such a wealth of knowledge being able to, and these are surgical cadavers. These are like the same ones that the surgeons use to practice their techniques. That's the important part, like, because the tissue is the closest to living tissue you're going to feel. So when you're needling into it, it's just such a different feeling, and you really can peel back layers and see the depth of your needle and be like, oh, I would have hurt that person, or, oh, I can go deeper than I thought. Like, there's a lot more space there than I thought. And that's like, if I was starting over and wanted to get into sports medicine, I would probably find a cadaver thing first, so I have that confidence if you're a nervous person, and then go look at, there's a lot of good people that are teaching stuff out there. So find someone that you can locally go to if you don't want to fly halfway across the country for a class, and go work with someone that's willing to show you what to feel with the tissue.
Sounds like good advice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's part of what sports medicine is, huh?
And there's a lot of trial and error, there's a lot of trial and error with it. You will have 10 patients come in and they all respond to the way you're doing something. And then the 11th comes in who has the same complaint and they don't respond to any of it. And then you're stumped and you're like, well, I thought this was, a QL locked up and the pelvis off, but it turns out there's deeper stuff with the SI joint or the facet. And that's, I guess, something we didn't talk about, is one of the other parts about learning the sports medicine stuff is you also will learn how to do the assessment techniques. So you're learning like the Western medicine assessment techniques. You're learning the orthopedic tests. You're learning trigger point work. You're learning how to like assess the body so that you can be like, oh, this is an SI joint, or, oh no, these 3 tests point to an SI, but this one's showing more facet. So is it both? Is it one or the other? And then that's when you start to have to kind of work through it with your skills.
Sounds like a really good way to get fluent with the body itself. Instead of listening to the patient say, I have this, I have that, it hurts here, it's this or it's that, just to go to see what the body says. Oh, they can move this. Oh, they can't move that. Oh, this is restricted. That sounds really, really helpful. I should probably go do more of that myself.
And then there's cool stuff where, where like someone can't raise their arm and it turns out you needle into the liver channel in the adductor area and all of a sudden their arm goes right up in the air. And you're like, all right, awesome. It's like, all right, that's super cool. There, you can do the midday, midnight, combination. You can look at it from all these different lenses, but no matter what you look through it, it's still just cool.
It is. Yeah. It's fun work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Besides the Cadaver Lab, any books that you have found? You mentioned anatomy trains.
Another cool to look at the body through kind of this work, and I do not remember his name right now. I apologize for that. But the neurokinetic therapy website, the blogs. Neurokinetic therapy. Hold on, I might be able to get you the name really quickly. But the neurokinetic therapy is a way of kind of connecting all this stuff.
We'll get that and put it on the show notes page for folks, so they'll just be able to go get it that way.
But yeah, so it's just a really cool. The book for neurokinetic therapy, I would not say is great. I have it. It's more just teaching you the muscle tests, but the blog breaks down more of like what the thought process is of how someone that's got chronic QL pain might also have a masseter and jaw clenching that's affecting it. And sometimes when you read that blog, you start to, David Weinstock, that's who it is. David Weinstock is the author of that technique. And it's really working with kinesiology, kind of the same stuff as anatomy trains, manual muscle tests. But sometimes you'll start to see these patterns from the Chinese medicine, like the Zhui Yin and like the Shaoyang and the Tai. Like you'll see these different channels and you're like, oh, that's how the jaw connects to that. Oh, that's all stomach channel stuff. And you start to see that and you're like, oh, well, the bicep is affecting this. Well, that's stomach channel and lung, or that's large intestine and lung. And you're like, oh, that makes sense. So that's a cool blog if you're just kind of wanting to start exploring the connections.
That sounds like fun. I'm going to go check it out. All right. Well, thank you for taking a little time today talking about these different aspects of so-called sports medicine.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure. Like if people want to get into it, it's awesome. You can do so many cool things with it and you can help a ton of patients. But again, the keys to it are just making sure you're having someone teaching it to you that's showing you the hands-on approach. It's a very hands-on approach of type of palpation-based medicine.
Okay. So if you're just interested in energetics, maybe this isn't for you. You got to enjoy getting your hands on people and seeing what the meat suit has to say.
And make sure you don't think of them as a meat suit.
But don't ignore the meat suit.
Don't ignore the meat suit, but make sure that you know that that's only a portion of it. The rest of the energetics portion, you also still, and like anything, you've been doing something long enough, you start to kind of sometimes get bored with what you're doing. So if you've been doing another style for a long time, like it's a great way to dabble into something else.
It's always good to go learn more about something you're interested in.
So, but yeah, it's been awesome talking to you, Michael. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Till next time then.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks for the podcast. It's really awesome to be able to hear all these different conversations you've had over the last 10 plus years. Is a wealth of knowledge.
Well, couldn't do it without folks like you.
Well, that's it for today's conversation with Darren. There are a number of things that stand out to me, one of which is how much of good clinical work happens between worlds, between languages, between professions, between points of view. It can be taken as competition or seen in a broader frame of collaboration. We talked a lot about translation today, between Chinese medicine and Western medicine, and how being able to speak the language of other providers, it builds trust, and beyond that, can build a solid working relationship across professional domains. I appreciated Darren's thoughts on clarity about what we're actually aiming for when someone says that they want to feel better. Are we chasing the absence of pain, or Are we helping someone to understand their capacity, how much load their system can take, and how quickly it can recover, and what needs to stay reliable over time? Those are different clinical questions, and they lead to different kinds of treatment. Too often, I forget to use the lens of tensegrity, how pain often shows up where tissue is overstretched and overworked. It's helpful to see what's locked short versus what's locked long. It asks us to not only think globally, but to consider function as well. And finally, there's that issue about collaboration. Needles don't belong to just one profession. Healing doesn't either. And when we move past turf wars and toward the inevitable migration of acupuncture into the conventional medical system, it's the patients who win. And if we open our perspective, maybe we can as well.